Okay, so what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be doing a little tutorial on some look dev inside of Solaris, specifically using MaterialX nodes. So as you can sort of see here, I've got a little sort of production style template where we basically have a top area which imports an asset, and then we have our layer break, so that's where the baking of our look file would start, and then we've got just some subdivision and polymesh attributes added, just so we know which to subdivide and which not to subdivide at render time. And then we've got our materials which we've created and then assigned into some different variants, followed by some lights, then some AOVs, and then that's where we bake out our look file, and then we have our render settings, and we're going to just view it from here basically. So it's pretty simple. We have got some global settings in here which are just some things which I've set up to basically help with the process. So you can rotate the asset, rotate the HDRI, number of light rotations in the turntable, as well as some quick settings like low, high, medium, and then also if you're choosing between progressive and bucket rendering. So they're obviously for our final render settings. I'm just going to be using the viewport settings for the time being while we do some look dev, just because it's a bit quicker, faster interactions. So yeah. Let's get started. So I think we're going to start by making a car paint material, but to get you guys into the right sort of mindset of the sort of material we're going to make and the uses for the material, and how it applies to production, I'm going to show you a different material first. So if I set this variant to the skin variant, which we can see right here, this is just a pretty standard sort of shader which I've built. So if we go into our material library where we built the material, you can see here that I've just got a subnetwork called skin, and then I've promoted some parameters pretty much just to be able to edit and actually go through the settings and make it a bit more user friendly, because you don't really want to be hopping into this node graph and editing the contents and messing things up and then breaking the shader too often. So the only times you probably would go into the shader is to probably expand the capability. So say for example, in a shot you've got this great skin shader, you know, obviously on a real example you'll have bump and displacement, and it'll be all breaking up, but then you don't have a layer for water. So say for example the character gets wet, you need to add an extra wet layer. Now this is when you would dive inside of this network, drop down a dielectric and expand the compatibility of the shader. But otherwise, for 99% of the time when you're look deving the asset, you're just going to be, you know, bringing in your textures, doing some HSV on it to match close to reference, also, you know, tweaking the RGB values just so it matches closer to reference, changing the scatter just so it looks right, and also changing, you know, the radius, and yeah, you know, just generic stuff like bringing the speculars up and down, bringing the second specular up and down, changing the roughness, multiplying the roughness, and then maybe changing the peach fuzz just so you can match closer to reference. And usually in a production workflow, you'd be given maybe a day, maybe 5 days, maybe a week, maybe a month, depending on the asset, to do the look dev for it. So you would probably have a base shader which you're given, you know, it just gets preloaded in a template, and you'd use that shader and you'd basically just match it to the reference because all the parameters have been promoted to be able to do that. And then if it is a very specific asset, you may need to then add that extra functionality. So I'm going to show you how to start building these shaders to hand out to your artists, so that they can basically speed up their process. So we're going to be building something like this. If you go actually dive in, you can see it's very, very simple. All we've really got here is just a subsurface, which is mixed with a diffuse, and then obviously the textures with the HSV. So we literally just got a texture coming in here, an HSV adjust, and then a multiply to multiply the RGB values, and then sort of a similar thing for the radius, and then a mix between the the diffuse and the subsurface. Then we're just layering on our first specular, our second specular, going into a sheen, and then we're adding this into a material surface, and then into a surface, then a surface material, outputting it, and then we're also doing displacement and so on. This is pretty standard workflow. So yeah, I'm going to basically be showing you how to do this. So instead of using like a principled shader, so we are just using these component blocks like the subsurface nodes, the diffuse nodes, to actually build a whole shader for our artists to use. So let's start off by creating a subnet. So you can use the MaterialX subnet, and basically all that does is it basically packages up these end nodes. So the surface material, the surface material, this one, MaterialX surface, and the surface material up into two different nodes pretty much at the end, and it will just output for you. So you can see here we've got surface, which goes into basically these are the surface materials. I'm not too fond of this. I don't know why necessarily. I just like making sure I've got the control over it anyway. Because if you are going to be building the shader, you might as well have that extra control. So I just put down a standard subnet, and then we have to mark it for export. So we'll call this car paint, as that is the shader we are going to be doing. So let's change our variant here to our car paint, so we can visualize it. Now, obviously, we've got a different material assigned at the moment, so we want to assign our car paint material. Now, this won't actually display anything as of yet. As you can see, it goes black because we've got nothing in there. So let's dive back into that material library where we're building it, and let's have a look. So we've got our inputs, which obviously we've got none at the moment, and we've got our output, which is pretty self-explanatory. So let's drop down the things that we need at the end. So that's the surface, which basically just converts our BSDFs into a surface, and then we need the surface material, which basically converts our surface into a material. So that means we can have our displacement shader. So this is basically just the collect nodes, and we'll just quickly rename these to car paint, just so we can keep track of everything. So we'll plug that in there. So that's done. We are ready to get started. So let's just drop down a diffuse for now. It's probably not what we're going to start off with, but just so we can sort of visualize what's going on here. So we've got a BSDF, which is going into a thing that's converting it from a BSDF into a surface, and then from a surface into a material, and then that material is then able to be read. So the surface can actually also be read, but obviously we want the displacement shader, so that's why I've kept that there. Now we're actually going to delete this, because if we think about a car paint, it starts off with a metallic layer. So we're going to get a conductor in here, and I'm actually going to change this from the standard IOR workflow into the artistic workflow. So we can just drop down the artistic IOR, which basically just means we can put a edge color and a reflectivity, and it converts it into an IOR and extinction, just so we've got a bit more artistic control over this. So I can literally just desaturate this, and that will give us sort of like an aluminium style metal or a chrome style metal. Obviously you can use correct IOR values, or you can use correct colors of metals, but for this we're just gonna kind of rush through this a little bit. Now I have got optics denoiser on, if that's why you're wondering why it looks slightly artistic, but that's just so we can quickly preview our renders and get the sort of like rough outline and gist, so we can start blocking in stuff. As for look dev, personally, I think that the texture is where you get all the detail. Look dev's really just blocking out the different layers that you need to get the look you want. So we're not too fussed about the little intricacies and details. Obviously we can do a later pass where we are fussed about that, but really we're just going to try and build the shaders, the base shaders at the moment. So let's call this, let's see what we've done. So we need to rename this to car paint. And I did not call that car paint, I just called that paint, so that's my bad. There we go. That all seems pretty good to me. And we can call this, let's call car paint 2. Oh, did I spell car paint wrong? I did. Sorry about that. There we go. Now we can call this car paint as well. And that looks pretty good to me. So let's adjust the roughness. Now this base layer, this is the first layer. So like say you imagine when you have a car, obviously you're making it out of like aluminium or some kind of metal. So this is literally just like the raw material, which has got no paint on it, which has got the base layer. And some may say this is a bit overkill to actually start blocking this out, but say we wanted a chase scene where we have the car rushing through a city or doing some stunts and then the paint gets scratched away, we can then actually reveal the metal underneath. So I always like blocking it out just in case that's needed, and it will just save you some time in the long run. So you might as well just do it. Now I'm going to set this to probably about 0.2 in the roughness, just because I think that's probably quite a nice sort of thing where it's slightly rough. If it was scratched away, it would be quite rough, but you're still getting some nice specular response from it. So I think we'll probably stick with that. And I think that's probably it for this layer for now. It's nothing complicated. Once again, we'll get all of our details from the texture. So this is just the shaders we're building right now. So let's add the next layer. So we'd have a primer layer, which would pretty much just be a diffuse. Now it would probably have a specular lobe. It depends if we're fussed about the specular lobe. Do we want to render it? Because it will obviously be quite intense. So it's really up to you what you want to do. Now, one thing which I have noticed is there's no mix really for this layer. So you may have to use a mix, which is slightly annoying, but it's actually the correct way to do it. So you really want to be mixing the diffuse, transmission, subsurface, conductors, refraction, and emission. Actually, emission you use additive, but you really want to be mixing those. And then the ones you want to be stacking or layering is the basically dielectric sheen and coats, which is once again just another dielectric layer. So realistically, we want to be mixing these. So let's grab our conductor and we'll put this in the background. We'll put in the foreground our nice diffuse shader, which by the way will look very boring. There you go. That looks a bit like a primer, which you'd have on a car. So usually it would have a bit of spec. We'll do it just because I guess if we're building it physically accurate, we might as well add it. So we'll just get rid of this BSDF bit here, and we'll just call this primer. And we'll call this primer as well. And you know what? I may actually, just because this is so long, I may just do diffuse. MTLX diffuse _ primer, just because we can still see it is that kind of diffuse anyway. So it's not too much of a fuss to get rid of that. And that looks pretty good to me so far. We want to try and keep it somewhat ordered as we work, just so we don't get lost. So yeah, let's start layering this up. Now these would be layered. So you're going to want to layer the top and the base. So we have got that the wrong way around, of course, because the dielectric is the top layer and the base is the diffuse. And if we view this, you will see what looks like a glossy grey shader. And realistically, the primer diffuse coat, especially if it got scratched off, it would be quite high in roughness. I'm not saying super high, but it won't be this shiny clean. So I think maybe around about 0.25 probably is where we want it. That look quite like a primer layer. So that's what you'd expect from a primer. So we'll call this layer primer, and we will call this one, I guess we will call it the primer. We'll call this one metal, actually, because it's not car paint. This is the metal layer. So I will do that. Sorry, I just knocked my mouse over there, if you were wondering what that noise was. And then, yeah, we will call this primer metal. That way it's pretty self-explanatory what it is. It's mixing the primer and the metal. So we will plug this one in here. And we'll plug this one in here. Now this is a bit of an issue with the the BSDF sort of system inside of Houdini at the moment with MaterialX. If you have it on 0, and our 0 should be the metal, because it's the background, you can see that 0 actually doesn't set it to be the background. But if we do 0.001, it will actually do it. Now I'm assuming this is just an error in the code at the moment, so I'm going to submit a ticket about this, because all of the other modes which aren't the BSDF modes, so for example just the standard like mixing modes for like floats and colors, this doesn't happen. It's only with the BSDF. So I'm assuming there's somewhere in the Houdini code or the Houdini implementation of MaterialX, they've made a bit of a mistake here. But no doubt side effects are great with fixing this stuff. It will get fixed pretty soon. But for now, the way I've kind of found a bit of a way around it is you just get a float. Obviously you could put 0.01, but it's not very user friendly. So you put down a float, so we'll just get a constant to get the float. So we can set this to float, and then we can plug that in. And this is set to 0, and magically it just works. So clearly under the hood it knows what's going on. It just seems that 0 for some reason is set to 1 inside of this shader when using the BSDF mode, which doesn't really make too much sense. But it doesn't matter, because we have got a way around that. And now we can sort of mix this together. So this would probably be mixed more towards the primer, obviously, which our primer is number 1. So we probably want this about 0.9. Maybe 0.8. And realistically, it could just be 1 if you wanted to, if it was a full coat, gone all the way over. But I like to still bring a little bit through, because naturally some areas are going to be splodgy, and just as a general thing, you probably do want to bring it down just a little. And it does make it look like a more complex shader. So you feel those layers building up, which is quite nice. So I put that just at 0.9, which I think is pretty fair for this shader. So now we've got our primer layer in. We can now start doing the fun part, which is the color. So the way I like to think of car paints is there's really 2 kinds. There's a diffuse and there's a metallic. Now the metallic ones usually tend to have flakes in. Unfortunately, MaterialX doesn't support any flakes at the moment, and it also doesn't have any OSL support inside of Houdini, which is a bit of a shame, because obviously you could then use flakes and it would be absolutely amazing. I'm not too sure if there is a way around it, but I guess that's something to come in the future. In the meanwhile, you will have to use an image texture. Unfortunately, I don't have one on hand at the moment, so we're just going to use a standard conductor, which is totally fine, because you would use that, you'd plug the flakes just into the normals anyway of the conductor to get that flake breakup. But yeah, so basically, as I was saying, you've got either metallic car paint or a bit more diffused car paint. So for the diffused one, we would just have like a diffuse BSDF here, and we'll call this diffuse underscore base. Yeah, base actually. And then we'll just drop down a constant, because we want this color to be controlled quite easily, because it's going to go in a lot of places. So we'll just do this and we'll set it to color. And then I'm going to find a nice sort of car color. I kind of like red. So maybe if we do something like, yeah, I am kind of feeling more around this area. Something like that. That's sort of nice car paint color. So we can just plug this straight into our area here, and we can see what color it looks like. Yeah, looks like a car paint color. And then we can just get a dielectric, and we'll layer these, obviously, of course. So we'll grab that, and we will then also set this to base, and set this to base, just so we've got a good naming convention. And we can obviously use backdrops to sort of tidy this up a bit later, once we've got it all sort of laid out. But at the moment, we're just sort of like, I guess, still working things out. So we've got that layer, and once again, I've done it where I put the wrong layer on first. There you go. And so the way this would work is exactly like this. This would be base And we would probably have this as quite a high roughness. So this would be probably about 0.35, maybe all the way up to 0.5. I'd say that's probably about right. Maybe we'll go a bit higher. I'm feeling that's a bit too diffuse now. So maybe we'll just cut it in half and we'll go 0.4. Yeah, I think that's about right. Now it looks quite rubbery, obviously, and that's because we haven't got our second layer. So one thing you can also do is you can tint this, which may help with the look, and then we can then add a dielectric on top, and this is basically like a coat. So do that and we'll layer this on. Now one thing I will actually do is it tends to be that if we drop down on HSV, it tends to be that the specular tends to be a bit brighter. So we're putting that in, but we're not getting any actual. Oh, there we go. In, out. There we go. And now we'll just bring these all up to 1. Oh, sorry. Bring the saturation up to maybe like maybe 2. We'll try 2. Maybe a bit too much. And then we'll bring this up to 2, which would definitely be too much. Let's turn it to 0. So we're actually too rough here at the moment. I'm not seeing much change. So let's go into our dielectric. So this is 0.2. Constant base. We'll set this up to a value of 1. And now we're really getting something going. It's not what we want, but it is looking a bit better. So maybe if we try putting the roughness to 0, we can actually see what's going on here. Right, so that's looking a bit strange at the moment. If we HSV adjusted it to white, we're getting the specular response we would expect. And that's why, it's because I adjusted this. So let's bring that back down again. And then we'll bring the saturation up here. And then raise this to 1.5. Let's have a look. How much wriggle room do we have? We're currently on 0.2. So we could do that by 2, to be honest. And that looks quite cool. And then we can go back into our dielectric and scale up the roughness to maybe 0.2, 0.2. Which looks kind of cool. So I do like how this is looking, but let's plug in our base and then our coat and see what it's actually looking like with a roughness of 0 on here. So we're not really getting that total car paint feel, even though we're coloring the spec, right? So it is looking like a car paint plastic, to be honest. It is actually looking like a more plasticky car paint, which is exactly what we want. But I think we could go a bit further. We could probably, if we bump that up, that's looking a lot more like it. And then there we can really see it is looking a bit more like a car paint where we've got that fall off on the edge. But it's still not quite there. So I think what we're going to probably do is we'll revert the saturation down to 1 and the brightness of this we may set to 2. And that will just be our plastic layer. We then can add a extra additional layer to this, which is quite common, where we will have a conductor. So we'll just use basically the exact same sort of things here. So we will just use the constant base color in we have to use the artistic for this. So we drag that into the IR and extinction, and then plug this into the base, the reflectivity, and this into the edge color. And then if we take a look at this now, that's looking quite cool, but obviously it's looking very, it's not looking rough enough. So let's set this to 0.3, 0.3. Well, that's looking like a car paint. So what we can do now is we can actually toggle between our more plasticky looking car paint, like you may get on, you know, as a standard car you get, and then sometimes you can pay more for the metallic car paint like this. So we can set up a mix for this, where we can then basically say, right, you can pick between, of course we're going to need our constant here because the float doesn't work between 0 and 1 for some reason at the moment. So we can then just plug this in. So all this is doing is, don't need this here. So this is the material layer base. I don't think we need that. So let's have a look. What's going on here? So is this dielectric base? So we sorry, my bad. I deleted something by accident. We need the. This is why I should keep things a bit more organized, because I was plugging things in all over the place that I kind of lost where we were. This actually needs to be, yeah, in like this and this. So this is our base. And then this is our background, like that. So now we can mix between the two. So obviously we'll call this diff metal. I'll call this def metal. And we'll set this to 0, like magic. It goes plasticky. And then let's just have a look again at this HSV. I think we could push it. What we may want to do is separate out these a little bit. So let's get another HSV. We'll keep the constant color plugged into them all. But I think we should do one for the metal, one not for the metal. So let's maybe push this to 3 and this to 5. So let me just make sure that what we're doing is going to work correctly. The value, if we did that times 5, that would not be too great. So I think the maximum we can do is probably about 3. I mean, realistically, we could do, I think about 3 is probably about right. And that way we won't get any issues in the shader. And then the saturation, I'm going to probably put, let's have a look at what it was at 1. It was at 0. It's looking pretty plain, isn't it? 2. I'm liking 2. Let's have a look at 1 again. Bit plain. I think we'll go 2. I think it's quite nice. So that's basically just setting this to a saturation of 2. Now that may kind of break the physicality, I'm not too sure, but hopefully it doesn't look too funky. And then we can then go back into the mix, which we've got here, and just set this to 0.5. And there we go. We've got a car paint shader, which I think it looks like a car paint shader. It looks pretty realistic. So obviously we've still got this primer metal bit which we didn't really use. Now we're going to mix this as well. So let me grab mix and see where best we could mix this. Now we've got the diffuse. It would realistically be mixed with this. So it would be the background and this would be the foreground. And this would go out. Now once again, realistically, we would have a scratch map because you'd have probably one for the scratches, the area, or in this case, one would be the actual car paint itself. And then the scratch would be black, 0, which would then use this primer metal. And we could probably plug the same map into the primer metal as well. But if we really want to, we can actually sort of mess around with how this would look. Now, obviously, we'd probably want this about 0.9. Maybe about 0.95 or 0.98. And that way we're still getting a bit from that previous shader, but it's just not a huge amount. Now, this may be a little bit overkill and expensive to render, but it saves you for when you do need the maps. And also, I think this does sort of reduce the saturation and shallow the material out a bit more. It makes it look a bit more realistic. It's not too vibrant and saturated. Now, I think I will probably go to about 9.8. So we've got 2% of this coming through. But I think that looks pretty good. And we then also got a dielectric. Now, realistically, this would not be totally clean. It would probably be about 0.01 roughness. And you can put in some nice sort of breakup into there. But I think I'm pretty happy with how this has come out. So let's have a look from a bit further away. Seem to be getting some very bright areas over here. Seems to be really catching the highlights. So I'm assuming that would be our dielectric coat. Let's have a look. Yes, that is. That's to be expected then. That's not abnormal. It's just clearly very bright on the lighting. Probably something to be aware of. But yeah, that looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with how the shade is looking. Now, obviously, like I said, we could put some flakes in there to really get it looking next level. But at the same time, we may not want to. And I may actually mix this back a little bit. So I can't remember. Was 0 diffuse? Yes. Maybe a 0.7. We'll get more metallic, won't it? Yeah. I'm just trying to think whereabouts we could take it. 0.3 looks nice, more like a normal car. This is more sports car-y, I guess. It's on 0.6. 0.45, just to mix the two. Could just go fully 1. You see, that's very sort of you do see some cars like this, but they're pretty rare. Usually there is always a diffuse element sort of mixed in, because at the moment this is pretty much all just specular. Actually, I think it is pretty much all just specular. If we go into our render settings, let's have a look if it is. There's no diffuse there at all. It's all specular. So we probably do want it to be around 0.65. I think that's a pretty fair amount. And I think that, you know, is a... Ooh, seem to have closed my my work area, which I did not mean to do. I'm just going to quickly reset my Solaris. It's gone away. There it is. Right. So let's go back into beauty. I think that's pretty good. You know, we've got a good diffuse contribution. We've got a good specular contribution. Overall, it looks really nice. It looks like a car paint shader. And And you can see now this is quite messy, so we can just tidy this up a little bit. So these nodes are literally just the out nodes. So we can just group these together. I like the out to be black just because it really kind of contrasts against the node. So you know, right, this is the output. Material layer. So which one's this? This is the coat. So we can call this underscore coat. So yeah, that looks pretty good. So let's probably bring this up. I'll kind of get these aligning a little bit. There we go. And then this is going to be a bit annoying to tidy up. So let's have a look. That can go under there. We may need some dot nodes. Actually, can't we just alt click? There we go. So pull this out. Oh. Let's bring that back in and dot it. There we go. So let's do that and that. It's quite good. Very readable. Pull this out a little bit. What we can do is actually pull this up quite far. And then I'm quite happy with that. So what we can do here is we can now sort of just tidy this up. So I'm going to call this one out. I'm going to call this one coat. And we'll make this a nice color. So actually we'll keep red for the other one. We'll make this we'll keep this as like a gray or a white. So this one is metallic, I think. And this can be red. And this is our other one, which is diffuse. This can also be red. Now this actually contains the mix node between them, so that should not be in there. This should be out here, like that. And then we can sort of pull these over. Like so. I think something like that would probably work. And we'll pull this all back because this is otherwise going to be quite. We'll group all of these and just call these base. I feel like that works quite well for it as well. That color. So that's looking pretty nice. We can now sort of easily define where's where, what's what. So I think that's a pretty good job. Now we're going to want to probably customize this a bit more with inputs and a user interface because we don't want to be diving into this each time. So I think it's probably time for us to start making a little bit of a user interface for this. Now let's go into the car paint here and we'll just quickly edit the parameters. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. So we'll now come in here and actually I'm going to just quickly rename these. So this is the mix between the metal and the primer. So I'll call this or base or color primer. Oh, got cap locks on. Like that. This one is diff metal, that's already named. Base, base, base. What did I call this one? Oh, I didn't. Let's name these metallic. Yeah, that works well. Oh, what do I call these? Base. So I should really keep the naming convention the same. And then base, or what we call this? Yeah, I guess color and primer. That works. Nice. That's all tidy now. Let's start with the interface. So we've obviously got this color node, which is great. So we can pretty easily bring this across. Now you can even drag it like this across into here, and that literally works. We can literally just call this car paint color, and then in here car paint color. So there we go. Apply and accept. Now if we come out here, you can see you've got car paint color here. So that's working really good. So let's just continue along with this sort of logic and continue to do this. So what are the main parameters we're going to be wanting to use here? I think it's probably going to be the mixes between the metal and the diffuse, and probably also the roughness value on the layers. So one thing I may actually do is to keep consistency. I may keep the roughness on here. This is 0.3. The roughness on the dielectric here is 0.3. So considering they're the same, we might as well set this to a float of 0.3 and then plug this and as roughness. So we'll call this spec roughness, because we've got another roughness, a coat roughness layer. So we'll plug that in there. We will plug this in here. Now it's not the most tidy in the world, but it's what we're just going to have to do for now. And we can then now go on to promoting this attribute. So we can just pull this across, and we'll call this one spec roughness. Keep the name parameters similar, so it makes a lot of sense. You can see now it just basically pulls in that attribute, or the perimeter even, and it just uses an expression to link it to it. And we'll just bring in this one. So yeah, let's use roughness here. We'll call this coat roughness. Nice. Now the IOR we're probably not going to change. The tint we're probably not going to change. The weight, maybe good to dial back the weight. So I think we'll have coat weight here. Just so in shots we can actually dial back the amount of the specular. And I think the same probably applies to the specular. So let's find the specular weight. So I'm actually going to drag this above, and then there we go. So I'm literally just naming the parameters here. It's nothing too special. Hopefully you're getting the gist of it. And if you're wondering why it's not updating here, it's because we're not on the right layer. So if you come up here now, you can see you've got car paint, specular weight, specular roughness, coat weight, coat roughness. So for example, if we just come in here and we turn off the specular weight, the underlayer of the specular is now gone, although it's technically not, because it's in the conductor as well. So let maybe the coat roughness is the best one. The coat weight, there you go. You can see the coat's gone now. But yeah, the roughness, I guess if we set this to 1, you can see now we've got rid of that. That's 3. That's where we're at. And then obviously we can up this. Now I don't like how this parameter's got two things, because it's not a float, or it's 2 floats. So I'm going to probably I got into the wrong material there. I'm probably going to come in here and adjust this. So where's that, the roughness? Let's actually delete this, and then we'll delete the specular roughness, or sorry, coat roughness, and we will grab a constant, and we'll just turn it into a float and plug it straight in. I think we're on 0.01, and then we can just drag this right in there and call this coat even roughness. There we go. Accept, and pop back out and see what happens. So we can now change the coat roughness. Yeah, and then we can reset to revert to default, and it will literally go back to what you originally set. So it's really, really great like that. I think we're pretty good for this. This is probably all that you want. We probably want the conductors stuff too, which may be a little bit difficult. Oh, we want the mix. That's a big one. We want the mix between metal and diffuse. So we'll call this metallic, because that's a parameter which is quite common in shaders, and all of the calculations basically done under the hood, because we've set it all up like so it should pretty much. So it's not just as simple as like a standard metallic shader, because obviously, well, I guess it is, but we've also got some cool things going in there, like it affects the color, makes some areas more saturated. So we have got a little bit of processing going on in there. And also, one thing that I don't like about some of these sliders is they do this where they're all the way up to 10. So we want that to be on 1, we want that to be on 1, we want this to be on 1. And they actually lock these between 0 and 1 for the roughnesses. And we should probably do that for the metallic as well. Yeah. Once again, 0 and 1, lock them. 0 and 1. Car paint color, range, that's fine. So apply. Now this way we've got it exactly how it should be. So if we put it to 1, it'll go to 1. If you put it to 4, I accidentally hit 4 then on my keyboard, it goes to 1. So you can't go over the roughness. We can literally tweak away at this forever, and we can just revert to defaults, and it's set to whack. So if we go to 0, see now we've got our plastic shader, 0.65, got our other shader, we got our mix, and then we got 1, it's our just our metallic shader. So I'm thinking right now, obviously we can't really adjust the weight of you can adjust the weight of conductor. So maybe we should do that. So just so if it is a bit intense in shots, we can scale it back. Sorry, I just struggled there a little bit for that for some reason. It's like, wait. Let's have a look. There we go. So that way we can say, for example, it's like, oh, well, the metallic's shining a bit too bright. We can just set this to like 0.6, and it's still there. it's just toned down a little bit. And same with the other ones. So realistically, we want the metallic weight above them all. It's coat weight, specular weight, and we can now separate these out into different compartments or different sections. So I think that's pretty fine in terms of everything else. I'm pretty happy with that. I think the color's pretty good. I think that works. It should work pretty well. So yeah, let's start organizing this a bit better. So you can get some folders in here. Drag this in here. We will set the name to color, or color in lowercase, and then color higher case. And we'll set this to collapsible. Apply that. We can actually come out now because we're done that. But you can see now here we've got a collapsible little menu, which is great. So we can then do specular. And once again, specular. And make sure we hit tab. Great. And then folder again for the coat. So maybe if I get rid of this. I wonder why the folder's now not letting me edit the name. Strange. Oh, is it because it's not collapsible? Yeah, there we go. So we want this to be called coat. So realistic, I think the metallic should actually go below the color. And that's a pretty nice layout. Apply, coat, specular. We need to make sure the specular's set to collapsible. And then apply that. And that looks pretty nice. And then I think this could technically still stay here. Maybe it shouldn't actually. I think just to be super clear, because otherwise it may confuse some artists, we'll call this metallic. I'll actually copy that and then paste it, and then make that smaller. Grab these, put these in. I think this metallic thing isn't particularly, or maybe I do metalness. So let's see if is there like a metalness parameter in a shader surface. Metalness, yeah, that's a term, and that is pretty much what it does. It does indeed go from more metalness to less metalness. So I guess I'm pretty happy with that terminology, and we just need to quickly adjust that because I've just noticed. There we go. Now that they're all collapsible, they're all the same, they follow the same structure. And what you can do is you can add a little text bit saying like all made by whichever artist, or just to give them a bit of credit. Or you can really do as much as possible, really, with this. So one thing which is obviously quite cool is we can really now iterate out a load of different sort of colors quickly. We can change it. There's blue, green, and obviously like for some of these colors, they're quite bold and out there. Like these would need to be toned back a little bit. So maybe this one's a bit less metallic, because it's only really like sort of reds and blues where you get these super vibrant sort of ones like this. So yeah, maybe we can edit some parameters. So let's try like a goldish sort of shader. So it'll probably be more towards the orange, thinking from most car paint shaders I've seen. Oh, sorry, car paint materials I've seen. Not everything is a shader. Real life is not a shader. So 0.2. Oh, I have accidentally created something there. So let's have a look at it with off. No metalness. And obviously if we turn off the metallic weight, it will do nothing. I feel like it's too bright. So we can bring it down a little bit. Maybe it's too saturated as well. That looks more like it. I've seen many cars in this sort of like goldy brown color. It's probably around this. Obviously, you probably match it RGB value wise to what you've got in plate or in shot, but you can get pretty close with it. Maybe 0.2 to sort of help it out. 0.3. That looks somewhat like a car paint shader, which I've seen about. One of my friends had a car which was this sort of color. So yeah, if you know, you know. But yeah, awesome. I think, you know, if we could get some flakes in here with some image textures, you obviously have that extra flexibility, but and more level of detail. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this has gone. So I'm gonna quickly just revert this back to default, and we can then go through our camera and see how it looks. Yeah, I'm really liking it. So let's just rotate it through a couple of. Yeah, it's looking really nice. And then let's maybe rotate the lighting. Yeah. Let's turn on some optics denoising. Yeah, that's looking really nice. It's looking like a car paint shader, which is good. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this tutorial. One thing I probably would do if I was using this in production, the specular is looking quite high. That's probably because of the lighting as well, but I'll probably turn it down to about 0.4. Or sorry, not the specular, the coat weight to probably about 0.4. And I feel like that would probably be more realistic to the real world, as that specular was coming off a bit bright. It's almost like a brand new clean car. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. And I hope this tutorial has been useful. It was probably quite a in-depth one specifically for production, but hopefully, you know, this is explained some things, or maybe confused you more. But you know, it is yeah. If you've got any questions, just put something down in the comments. I read them all. And try to respond to as many as possible. So yeah, if I were you, you know, give this a go. Like the MaterialX system, which has been introduced, is just so great. I really haven't, you know, gone back to using the principled shaders, just because this is, you can build your own material libraries up in your own way with your own custom parameters, and it's just really powerful. So I totally recommend it. And yeah, I know this has been a bit of a long video, but hopefully it was useful. And thanks for watching, guys. If you want more, then just like comment down what you want video wise, and drop a like, subscribe, and yeah, you can always get in contact with me in the comments or on my Twitter or on Discord. So yeah, thanks for watching.